What is going on, everybody? My name is Michael Levan. Thank you so much for joining me. And today, what we're going to take a look at is validation in Go. Now, this may seem like something that's difficult, but it's actually quite simple and straightforward. So, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my package and I'm going to call a validator. Sure, why not? The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to set up my imports for my packages. So, I'm going to be using the standard FMT so I can print to the screen. I'm going to be using a log so I can create any log messages. And then here's a new one that we haven't really went through in this, Go quality series. And what that is the validator. Now, what the validator is it's a package. It's not a standard package. It is a third-party package. And what it allows us to do is it allows us to validate our code. In this case, we're going to be validating a struct. So what is that struct going to be? Well, we're going to do type car struct. We're going to make this real straightforward car. Everybody knows what a car is, so it won't be a random topic that nobody knows about. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create my brackets here. Now, I'm going to do a make, and that's going to be a string. I'm going to do a model, and that's going to be an int. So the make is going to be, BMW, Audi, Ford, etc. And then the model, it really depends. Like, you would think of a model as, the model of the car, like a 3 Series or something, but maybe it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever, that doesn't matter. So now what we're going to do is we're going to set up our function. So we're going to say func C. Now we can really name this whatever we want, but it is a community best practice to set up your argument name as just, like one letter, for example. So we're going to say C, and then what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to give this C a type. And what that type is going to be is car, and we're going to give it a pointer as well so we can point to specific values. And then I'm going to open up my brackets here, and I'm going to type FMT print ln, and I'm going to say validating. Now, before we go on, there is one thing that I want to point out if you haven't noticed already, and that is that func, there's no function name after it. So what this is it's actually called an anonymous function. And what an anonymous function does is essentially allows us to define a function without giving it a name. And it's really useful if you want to create inline functions, which is exactly what we're going to do. We're going to create a function that's essentially tied to our type, or at least used in our type. So I'm going to go back up here and we're going to specify now the anonymous function. I'm going to say val here, and that's going to be for our validation. Then I'm going to go down to line 18, and I'm going to say val equals validator, aka I'm calling that package on line 7. Then I'm going to say new. So I'm going to initialize the validator package, and I'm going to initialize it into the val variable. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say validate equals val dot, and now we can see we have a whole bunch of properties that are going to pop up and a whole bunch of methods. So we can use struct, and what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to validate our struct. Now remember, our struct is tied to the C variable, and C is tied to our argument in our function, which is of type car, the type struct that we created. So now what we're going to do is we're going to say if validate not equals nil log println, and we're going to say error on validate, if I can spell correctly, validate of type car. Now essentially what this is saying is if validate is not equal to nil, because validate should be equal to nil if we're not validated. Validate should be not equal to nil. There should be nothing that comes back unless there's some error on the struct or on the type. So with that, we have our anonymous function. And one more thing that I want to point out before we move forward is we have the func and then the parameter list. So we have our parameter list. Our C is our argument or our parameter. It's pointing to type car. And then we have val afterwards. And val is going to actually be that return type that we're going to use in our main function. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to type func main. Okay, and then get my brackets here. Now I'm going to say v equals new car. So what that's going to do is that's going to initialize our car type, and then we're going to go ahead and we're going to validate it. So how are we going to validate it? Well, with our anonymous function. So we're going to say v dot, and we have a few options here. We have make and we have model, aka what the actual types are of the struct car. And then we also have this function here, our anonymous function, val. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to call that anonymous function. What that's going to do is it's going to call the output here in this function to actually validate our struct. So up here, I'm going to go to my terminal, ls, then I'm going to go to validator, and we can say go run cars.go. Oop, can't run a non-main package. Sorry about that. Let me change this to main here so we can actually run our package. Okay, and now we can see validating. So let's make this a little bit more verbose. We have this println statement here that's validating, and then we have an if statement saying that if validate doesn't equal nil, log an error. So what happens if there is an error? Well, we need to know that. So we're going to say log println no errors occurred. We're going to go ahead and we're going to run this, and we can see no errors occurred. So we are officially good to go. And with that, that's how you can validate code with Go. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you again next time.